The Interstellar Military Academy of Cathera had stood for 600 years. Its walls had trained generals, admirals, and conquerors from 47 species. Its reputation was simple. Only the strongest survived the first year. On the morning of day 1, 41 cadets stood in the central training yard under a violet sky. 40 of them were aliens. One was human. Cadet Lily Chun had arrived the night before on a shuttle that smelled like recycled oxygen and bad decisions. She was 5 feet 4 inches, had a braid down her back, and carried a duffel bag covered in faded patches from the Terra Endurance Corps. She had signed up for the Academy's elite combat track because the recruiter said it was challenging. The recruiter had never been to Earth. The 40 alien cadets were impressive by any galactic standard. There was Vork, a Thalassian standing 8 feet tall with armored plating along his forearms. There were twin Gekari sisters, Syra and Scylla, whose reflexes had been clocked at 0.04 seconds, faster than most species could blink. There was Commander Trainee Deathworld, a Creathian whose home planet had gravity twice the galactic standard and whose species had never once, in recorded history, lost a melee duel. Lily stood at the end of the line and yawned. The Academy's chief combat instructor, Master Renvo, walked slowly down the row of cadets. He was old, gray-scaled, and had the posture of a being who had never once doubted himself. He stopped in front of each cadet and stared long enough to make them uncomfortable. He stopped in front of Lily. He looked down. She looked up. "Human," he said. "Yes, sir. This is the elite combat track." His tone carried the patient condescension of a teacher explaining to a child why fire was hot. "Admission was extended to your species as a diplomatic courtesy. I want that on record." "Noted, sir." He stared another moment, then moved on. Vork leaned down slightly from his massive height and murmured to the Gekari twins, "She will not last the first drill." Syra agreed. Scylla agreed harder. The first drill was the staff trial. In the Academy's tradition, each new cadet cohort would face the trial on day 1. A ceremonial combat staff, ancient, heavy, nearly 2 meters long, was mounted on a stone pedestal in the yard center. The instructor would call each cadet forward. The cadet would take the staff, hold it overhead with both hands, and stand for 60 seconds under a resistance field calibrated to twice their home planet's gravity. It was a test of strength, yes, but also of pride. The Academy wanted to see how cadets carried themselves when it hurt. Renvo began calling names. Deathworld went first. He lifted the staff with practiced grace, held it for 60 seconds, and set it back with barely a tremble. His planet's gravity prepared him well. The other cadets offered the clicking sound that served as applause across 3 different species. The twins went together by tradition. They held the staff between them, each hand a blur of controlled muscle, and completed the trial without expression. Vork lifted the staff so easily that Renvo increased the resistance field for him specifically. Even then, he finished with 2 seconds to spare and a small, satisfied grin. One by one the cadets stepped forward. Some struggled. One, a nervous Pelith with feathered limbs, dropped to one knee at the 40-second mark but ground out the final 20 through pure will. The cadets around him clattered their approval. Then Renvo's eyes moved to the end of the line. "Chun, Lily, human, step forward." The yard went quiet in the way that yards go quiet when people expect something embarrassing. Lily walked to the pedestal. The staff was ancient ironwood reinforced with compressed star alloy. It weighed, by galactic standard measurement, approximately 80 kilograms. The resistance field, calibrated to standard double, the same setting used for all cadets, would add the equivalent of another 120. Lily looked at it for a moment. She reached out with her right hand. One hand. She picked up the staff. Not with effort. Not with a grunt or a visible strain of muscle or a slow, deliberate heave. She lifted it the way a person picks up an umbrella before leaving the house, casually, incidentally, while still looking at something else. The entire yard froze. She raised it overhead, one-handed, elbows slightly bent. "Sir," she said, "is the field active?" "It doesn't feel different from standard." Renvo's secondary eyelids, the ones that only closed when a Rethian was genuinely shocked, slid halfway shut. "It is active," he said, after a pause that lasted approximately 1 geological era. Lily shifted the staff to a slightly more comfortable grip and waited. The 60 seconds passed. She set the staff down. It made a solid clunk against the pedestal. She walked back to her place in line. The yard remained silent. Vork was staring at her with an expression his species reserved for witnessing things that should not exist. Syra and Scylla had turned to each other and appeared to be having a rapid, entirely wordless conversation conducted through minute facial movements. Dhual, whose species had the second highest natural strength index in the known galaxy, was doing math in his head and not liking the answers. Instructor, Vork said slowly, what is the surface gravity of the human homeworld? Renvo consulted his datapad with the energy of a being who wished he had retired 2 years ago. He read the number. He read it again. He looked at Lily. That's standard, Vork said, confused. Just slightly below standard, actually. Yes, Renvo said. Then how? I don't know. What they didn't know, what the galactic community had spent 300 years failing to properly catalog, was what Earth actually was. Not the gravity. The gravity was ordinary. It was the rest of it. Earth was a world where the oceans contained creatures that could swallow submarines, where the forests produced toxins that killed in minutes, where the atmosphere crackled with electrical storms that leveled landscapes, where the seasons could flip from livable to lethal in a matter of days, where diseases mutated faster than medicine, where the megafauna, even the domesticated megafauna, weighed tons and had been known to throw cars. Humans had not conquered Earth because they were the strongest species on it. They had survived Earth because they were relentless, because their bodies had been forged across hundreds of thousands of years of sprint or die, climb or fall, carry or starve, because they healed, because they endured, because they pushed through pain that would register as system shutdown for species that had evolved on gentler worlds. Lily hadn't lifted the staff one-handed to show off. She had lifted it one-handed because 2 hands felt like overkill. By the end of the week, 3 cadets had formally requested transfer to a different cohort. By the end of the month, the number was 40. Not because Lily was cruel. Not because she was arrogant. She was, by every social metric, perfectly pleasant. She helped Vork study his tactical theory modules. She shared her ration supplements with the Pelith cadet, whose metabolism struggled with academy food. She laughed easily and slept deeply and never once mentioned the incident with the staff. That was almost the problem. The 40 cadets who filed transfer requests cited various official reasons: scheduling conflicts, specialization realignment, medical advisories. Every single one of them told their friends the same thing, privately, in the way that soldiers tell each other truths they can't put in reports. I am not prepared to train beside something that treats the hardest drill we have like it's nothing, and doesn't even realize it. Renvo approved none of the transfers. He had been an instructor for 40 years. He had seen strong cadets and weak cadets and cadets who were brilliant and cadets who were disasters. He had never, not once, seen a cadet make 40 others feel small simply by existing. He walked to the training yard on the morning of day 31, where Lily was already there before dawn, running sprint intervals with a weighted pack that she had loaded herself to triple her body weight. He stood and watched for a long moment. "Chun," he said finally. She stopped. "Sir." "The transfer requests." He folded his hands behind his back. "I denied them all." "I heard, sir. I'm sorry if I..." "Don't apologize." His voice was gruff, but something in his secondary eyelids had shifted. "You didn't do anything wrong. They need to learn what you already know." She tilted her head. "What's that, sir?" Renvo looked at her for a long moment. "That the universe is difficult," he said, "and difficulty is not a reason to leave." Lily considered this. Then she nodded once, slung her weighted pack back on, and returned to her sprints. Renvo walked back to his office. He had 40 cadets to talk to. He suspected, for the first time in a long career, that he was going to have fun doing it.